The champagne caught the light wrong, cloudy where it should have been golden. Nola Jordan noticed. Her lover, the Korean mafia boss sitting 12 feet away at his family's annual reunion, didn't. She watched his hand move toward the flute. 3 seconds. That's all she had. 3 seconds to decide whether to save him or finally let go. She crossed the room, lifted the glass, and drank. But here's what nobody knew in that moment. Not her lover, not his mother watching from across the ballroom, not even the brother who'd poisoned that champagne. Nola didn't just drink it to save him. Part of her drank it to escape. 4 years of being hidden does that to a woman who's forgotten she's allowed to exist in daylight. This is Nola, 32 years old, mother of 3-year-old Isaiah. For 4 years. She's been the secret Choi Woo-jin keeps locked away in a luxury apartment on the other side of Atlanta. The woman he visits when his official life gets too heavy. The woman who makes him feel alive. The woman he's never once introduced to anyone who matters. Her lover, Woo-jin, runs a crime empire. Important work. Dangerous work. Work that requires a certain kind of public image. A Korean wife? Korean children? Korean traditions. So Nola became invisible, hidden, cherished in private, erased in public. Tonight, at this family reunion, that erasure is about to cost her everything. If you want to witness the moment everything shatters, subscribe to my channel. Let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. In the heart of Atlanta's wealthy Korean-American crime families, there are rules even bosses must follow. Rules about loyalty, about bloodlines, about protecting the image of power. But there's one rule nobody talks about, the one that matters most. Never underestimate the woman you've taught to survive in shadows. On this particular Saturday evening in June, that rule was about to be broken in the most devastating way possible. The grand ballroom at the Rosewood Estate. Crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across 200 guests, white linen tablecloths, champagne towers, the annual Choi family reunion, an event that brought together 3 generations of Atlanta's most powerful Korean-American crime syndicate. Left side of the room, near the service entrance where staff moved in and out, Nola Jordan stood in a black dress she'd bought herself. Not designer, not expensive. Just something that let her blend in with the catering staff if anyone looked too closely, which no one did. Center of the room, surrounded by elders and advisors, Choi Woo-jin, the boss everyone called untouchable. Navy Armani suit, gold cufflinks that cost more than most people's cars, phone in hand, scrolling through messages while pretending to listen to his uncle discuss territory negotiations. Right side of the room, Choi Sang-ho, the younger brother, gray suit, sweating despite the air conditioning that kept the ballroom at exactly 68 degrees. His wife, Yoona, stood beside him, pregnant with their second child, oblivious to the tension radiating from her husband's rigid shoulders, and moving through it all with the stillness of a woman who'd built this empire from rubble, Choi Min-ji, 68 years old. Silk hanbok in traditional burgundy. Silver hair pinned with jade ornaments, watching everything with the precision of a hawk circling prey. This is how power arranges itself at a family reunion. This is the geometry of a celebration that looks perfect from the outside. From the inside, it was already fracturing. For 4 years, Nola had been Woo-jin's escape, the woman he came to when negotiations failed, when his mother's expectations crushed him, when the weight of being Choi Woo-jin became too heavy to carry alone. She was good at reading him. Had to be. When you exist only in stolen hours, you learn to extract meaning from every glance, every sigh, every silence. Tonight, she was reading everything. Sang-ho's fingers drummed against his thigh. Once, twice, 3 times, stopped. Nola knew that tell. Her 3-year-old son, Isaiah, I did the same thing when he'd broken something and was waiting to see if anyone noticed. The rhythm of guilt. The servers moved through the crowd with champagne flutes arranged on silver trays. One server, a young man with a bow that was too deep, an apology too smooth, made his way directly toward Wu Jin. "Your champagne, Mr. Choi." The flute was placed in Wu Jin's hand. He didn't look at it. He was explaining something to Elder Park about container routing, numbers, logistics. The language he spoke fluently, the language he'd never taught Nola because, as he'd said twice in the last month, "You don't need to understand the business. You just need to understand me." But Nola understood more than he knew. She understood numbers from her accounting degree she'd never been able to use. She understood desperation from the way Sang-ho was watching that champagne flute now, not like a brother watching his sibling drink, like a man watching a countdown timer, waiting for detonation. And she understood what she was seeing in the glass itself. The effervescence was off, too aggressive at first, then dying too quickly. The color was wrong. Faintly cloudy where it should have been crystal clear. Champagne doesn't look like that. Not the good kind. Not the kind the Choi family served at reunions. Nola's mind calculated faster than her heart could catch up. Poison in Woo Jin's glass at a family reunion. Which meant someone close, someone trusted. Someone who'd calculated that tonight was the night Choi Woo Jin died. 3 seconds. That's how long she had before his hand raised the glass to his lips. 3 seconds to decide. Option 1. Speak. Warn him. Watch him dismiss her. The way he dismissed everything she said that didn't fit his immediate agenda. "You're being paranoid, Nola." And if she was wrong, if she caused a scene over champagne that was fine, she'd be the hysterical mistress who'd crashed a family event she was never supposed to attend. Option 2. Say nothing. Let him drink. Watch him die. Raise Isaiah alone. Become the secret that died with him. No one would even know to grieve for her. Option 3. The one that made no logical sense. The one that felt like inevitability. She crossed the 12 feet that separated them. Guests parted for her without registering her presence. Staff, they assumed. Background. Her fingers closed around the stem of the champagne flute just as Woo Jin was raising it to his lips. "Let me taste that for you." Her voice was soft, the kind of tone she used when asking if he'd remembered to call his mother. Undemanding. Easy to ignore. He didn't pause his conversation with Elder Park. Didn't look at her. Just released the glass without acknowledgement, like she was a server who'd offered to refill his drink. She brought it to her lips. Bitter. Chemical. Wrong. She drank anyway. The burn started in her throat. Not the warm bloom of good champagne. Fire spreading fast. Her chest tightened. Heart stuttering like it had forgotten its rhythm. Her hand flew to her chest. Not dramatic. Reflexive. The way you grab for something solid when the ground shifts beneath you. The champagne flute slipped from her other hand, crystal shattering on marble, golden liquid spreading across white stone like watercolor. 12 feet away. Woo Jin was still talking. "So if the shipment clears customs by Thursday, we're ahead of schedule for..." He hadn't noticed. Minji noticed first. The matriarch's eyes snapped from Nola to the shattered glass to Sang-ho, whose face had drained of all color. She didn't gasp. Didn't shout. Didn't reach for Nola. Instead, she set down her own glass with deliberate care, the kind of control that comes from 5 decades of surviving rooms where panic gets you killed. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, precise. "Sang-ho, call Dr. Yoon now. Tell him sodium azide poisoning." The brother froze. His mouth opened. No sound came out, because Minji hadn't asked what happened. She'd diagnosed it, and she'd used his name first. Not as a command, as an accusation. "Mother, I don't..." She cut him off. "The glass was meant for your brother." She drank it for him. "Call the doctor." Each word landed like a gavel. Sang-ho's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Screen lit up. Face pale, sweating, guilty. He dialed. Woo Jin was still talking. "So if we reroute through Vancouver..." It was the absence of sound that finally cut through. The silence where the ambient noise of the party should have been. The space that had suddenly emptied around him as guests noticed something was wrong. He turned. Nola was on her knees. One hand pressed to her chest, the other braced against the marble floor. Her lips had a faint blue tinge, her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something he couldn't see. Nola. Nothing. Nola. Louder this time, urgent, the first time he'd ever said her name in public. She didn't respond. And for the first time since the night his father was assassinated and he'd taken over the organization at 29, Choi Woo-jin felt genuine fear. The room moved. Guests backed away. Elder Park reached for his phone. Minji raised one hand. Stop. No one leaves. No one calls anyone except Dr. Yoon. This family handles its own emergencies. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The kind you don't question. Not if you want to stay in this room. Not if you want to stay alive. She looked at her son. Woo-jin, get her on the floor flat. Elevate her legs. Keep her conscious. He'd lifted bodies before, disposed of threats in the back rooms of warehouses, negotiated under gunpoint in shipping containers, watched men die and felt nothing because feeling meant weakness. But when he lifted Nola, his lover, the mother of Isaiah, and the woman he hadn't truly looked at in months, his hands shook. She was lighter than he remembered. 32 years old, and she felt fragile in his arms. Breakable. Or maybe he'd just forgotten what it felt like to hold her. He lowered her to the floor. Marble. Cold. He shrugged off his Armani jacket, placed it under her head. Nola, stay with me, look at me. Her eyes drifted, unfocused. He pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, pulse faint, irregular. His other hand went to her neck. Carotid artery. Thready. He'd learned this in the Marines, before the Empire, before the secrets, before he'd become the kind of man who hid his lover like contraband. Nola, can you hear me? Nothing. Through the chemical burn and the way her heart kept forgetting to beat, Nola felt his arms around her, heard him saying her name, not the distracted, Nola. Can you handle Isaiah tonight? She'd heard for 4 years. This was different, urgent, afraid. And beneath the pain, beneath the fear that she might actually die, that Isaiah might grow up without a mother, there was something else. Something she was ashamed to acknowledge, even as poison shut down her organs. Relief. She finally mattered. Even if mattering meant dying. 15 minutes. That's how long it took Dr. Yoon to arrive. 15 minutes of Woo-jin holding Nola on the floor of the Rosewood Estate ballroom while 200 guests watched in stunned silence. 15 minutes of Minji interrogating Sang-ho with surgical precision in a corner of the room, her voice low enough that no one else could hear the accusations. 15 minutes of Nola's pulse growing fainter under his fingertips. Doctor. Yoon came through a service entrance with a black medical bag. Old school. The kind of doctor who still made house calls for families who couldn't go to hospitals. Families with secrets. He knelt beside Nola, checked her pupils, her pulse, listened to her heart. Sodium azide. Minji's voice, calm, certain. Yes. Dr. Yoon moved fast. IV inserted into Nola's arm. Sodium bicarbonate, fluids, oxygen. His hands were steady, practiced. Woo-jin watched. Useless. The man who controlled shipping routes from Vancouver to Singapore couldn't do anything but hold his lover's hand and wait. 5 minutes passed. Dr. Yoon sat back. Checked her vitals again. He looked up. She'll survive. Woo-jin exhaled. Didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. She only consumed about 40 milliliters. 2 sips. The full glass would have killed an adult male in under 10 minutes. Dr. Yoon looked at Woo-jin directly. Mr. Choi, that champagne was meant for you. The ambulance ride to the family's private medical facility took 20 minutes. Woo-jin sat beside the gurney, holding Nola's hand for the first time in over a year outside of his bedroom. Since Isaiah was born, she'd been in the hospital and he'd promised to be there more. Promised to make time. Promises he'd forgotten the moment the next territory negotiation came up. Her pulse was steadying now, the treatment working, her breathing evening out. She was going to live. But as Wu Jin watched her unconscious face, her features softened without the careful mask she always wore around him, a terrible question took root. If she saw the poison, if she knew it would kill, why didn't she just warn him? Why did she drink it herself? Like she'd been waiting for this moment. Not to save him, but to escape. If you're feeling this story in your bones, drop a like and subscribe. These are the stories that deserve to be heard. Now let's continue. 1 week later, Nola was awake. Private suite at the Hanyul Medical Center. The facility the Choi family had used for discreet medical matters for 2 decades. Oak furniture, cream walls, windows that overlooked a garden designed to look peaceful from the inside while guards patrolled the perimeter outside. Nola sat propped against pillows, mechanically eating the seollyeongtang Minji had brought in a thermos that morning. Traditional Korean recipe. Beef bones simmered for hours with ginger and garlic. The kind of thing that was supposed to restore strength. Her color was returning. Brown skin warming from the ashen gray it had been. Her vitals were stable. Dr. Yoon had checked them that morning and nodded his approval. But something fundamental had changed in the way she held her body. Like a string that had been pulled too tight for 4 years had finally snapped. She moved carefully now, deliberately, like she was learning how to inhabit her own skin again. The door opened. Woo Jin entered carrying white roses, her favorite flowers. Though he'd had to text his assistant at 3 a.m. to confirm, the assistant had responded within 2 minutes. She kept files on these things. He also brought a small Cartier box. Red. Iconic. The kind of box that's supposed to make everything better. Nola. She looked up, set down the spoon, folded her hands in her lap. How are you feeling? Better. Doctor. Gyun says I can go home in a few days. Her voice was steady, polite, the tone she used when coordinating Isaiah's schedule with his nanny. Not warm, not cold, just empty. Woo Jin sat in the chair beside her bed. The roses went on the windowsill. The Cartier box stayed in his hands. He'd rehearsed this. In the car, in the elevator. Standing outside her door for 5 minutes before entering. I should have listened. Nola didn't respond. Just watched him with eyes that were present but distant. You tried to warn me about Sang-ho, about the financial discrepancies. You tried to tell me something was wrong. He paused. I dismissed you. I told you that you didn't understand the business. I'm sorry. He opened the Cartier box. Diamond earrings. Delicate. The kind of thing she never wore because she had nowhere to wear them. No galas. No events. Just Isaiah's daycare pickup and grocery runs and lonely nights in an apartment no one was supposed to know existed. I should have trusted your instincts. You have good judgment. I won't make that mistake again. Nola looked at the earrings, then at the roses, then at him. Thank you. She took the box, admired the earrings with the kind of attention you give to things that don't actually matter. Set it on the bedside table beside the water pitcher and the call button she hadn't pressed once in 7 days. They're beautiful. I know you like white roses. I should have brought them sooner. You've been busy, I understand. The family reunion aftermath must have been complicated. Everything's handled. Sang-ho is contained. Good, I'm glad. The conversation had the rhythm of 2 people discussing weather. Predictable. Safe. Emotionally empty. Woojin noticed. He just didn't understand what it meant yet. From the doorway, Minji watched. She'd arrived 5 minutes before her son. Intentionally. Positioned herself where she could observe without participating. The matriarch had survived 5 decades in this world by reading what people didn't say out loud. She saw her son bringing gifts and apologies. She saw his mistress accepting them with mechanical politeness. She saw the disconnect. He thought he was fixing a professional oversight, failing to trust her business analysis. Nola knew he was apologizing for the wrong betrayal entirely. Minji said nothing, just watched, calculated, waited. 2 hours later, Isaiah arrived. The 3-year-old burst through the door with the unfiltered energy of a toddler who'd been told to be gentle with mommy and had no idea what that actually meant. He climbed onto the bed carefully, or his version of carefully, which involved 2 near falls and an elbow to Nola's ribs, and pressed his small face against hers. "Mommy, you're awake." "Hi, baby. Why did you get sick? Daddy said you had to stay at the hospital, but you don't look sick." And Nola, who had held everything together for 4 years, who had absorbed every lonely night, every canceled plan, every time Woojin had to leave early because his real life called, started crying. Not dramatic sobs, not the kind of breakdown you see in movies. Just silent tears she couldn't control, streaming down her face while her son watched, confused. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Isaiah patted her face with tiny hands, trying to wipe away tears that kept coming. "T-Rex makes me feel better." He pressed his stuffed dinosaur into her arms. "You can hold him." Woojin stood there, useless. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals without flinching, ordered security details with precision, but he had no idea how to comfort his own son's mother. Minji gently took Isaiah's hand. "Let's let mommy rest. We'll come back tomorrow." "But mommy's crying." "I know, Isaiah. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're tired. Mommy will be okay." She led him out, closed the door with a soft click that felt louder than it should have, leaving Woojin alone with his lover and a question he couldn't answer. Why had holding their son made her cry harder? After a long silence, Nola wiped her face, composed herself with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to cry quietly in empty apartments while her son slept in the next room. "When was the last time you asked me how I was doing?" Woojin blinked. "What?" "Not my schedule. Not if Isaiah is hitting milestones. Not if the apartment needs anything." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "Me. When did you last ask about me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, mentally scrolled through conversations, weeks of text messages, logistics, status updates, calendar coordination. He genuinely couldn't remember. The silence stretched. Heavy. Nola nodded, like he'd just confirmed something she already knew. "I warned you about the money because I pay attention. I drank the poison because I saw what you didn't." She looked at him directly. No anger, just exhausted truth. "But you want to know something? I had to nearly die for you to finally look at me, and even now you're apologizing for not listening to my business analysis." She gestured to the roses, the earrings, the careful apology he'd rehearsed. "You're not apologizing for the fact that I've been invisible to you for 4 years." Woojin left the hospital that night believing he understood. He'd failed to value her contributions, taken her competence for granted, treated her like a convenience instead of a partner. All true, all worthy of apology. But Minji, watching him drive away in his black Mercedes, knew something he didn't. Nola hadn't told him the real reason she drank that poison, hadn't confessed that part of her wanted to escape. And until he knew that truth, every apology he made was just expensive noise. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, drop a comment, because what Nola is about to reveal will change everything Woojin thinks he knows about her heroism. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. 2 weeks post-poisoning, Nola came home physically recovered. The doctors had cleared her. No lasting damage to her heart or kidneys. The sodium azide had flushed through her system. She was, medically speaking, fine. Emotionally, she'd checked out entirely. She went through the motions, made breakfast Isaiah wouldn't eat. He wanted pancakes. She'd made eggs. He wanted the dinosaur plate. She'd used the blue one. Small failures that used to roll off her back now felt like evidence of something broken. She coordinated schedules in the Notes app on her iPhone, responded to messages from no one, actually. And because no one knew to check on her. She didn't exist in Woo Jin's official world. No concerned wives of associates. No family members calling to offer support. Just silence. Everyone who knew about her saw a woman recovering from trauma. Minji saw a woman who'd stopped trying. Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the poisoning. Isaiah was at the park with his nanny. Minji had suggested it that morning. Casually. Like it was just a nice day for fresh air. Woo Jin was at a territory meeting. Also Minji's doing. She'd scheduled it to run long. Made sure the agenda was packed with details that required his attention. The apartment was quiet when she arrived. She didn't knock. Used the key Woo Jin didn't know she had. Found Nola in the living room folding Isaiah's laundry with the mechanical precision of someone who needed her hands busy so her mind wouldn't wander. Minji set down her purse, vintage Chanel, the kind she'd owned since the 1980s, placed a thermos of tea on the coffee table. "We're going to talk." Nola looked up, didn't argue, just set down the tiny t-shirt she'd been folding and nodded. "Not about what everyone thinks happened," Minji continued. "About what actually happened." Nola's hands stilled. Minji sat across from her. Not beside her on the couch where it might feel comforting. Across. Where she could see Nola's face clearly. "You've been lying." Not accusatory. Observational. The way you'd point out that someone had missed a button on their shirt. "To my son. To yourself." Minji poured tea into 2 cups. Jasmine. And the scent filled the room. "Everyone is calling you heroic. You're accepting the label like it's a coat that doesn't fit. Why?" Nola reached for the practiced response, the one she'd given a dozen times in the last 3 weeks. "I did what anyone would." "No." Minji's voice cut clean, sharp, final. "You did what someone who was desperate would do. There's a difference. And I need to know which kind of desperate you were." Silence. Nola picked up her tea, set it down without drinking. Her hands were shaking. For 2 weeks, she'd held everything together. Accepted the upgraded apartment Woo Jin had suddenly insisted on, tolerated his apologies and expensive gifts, nodded through Dr. Yoon's follow-up appointments. But alone with Minji, the one person who seemed to see through every performance, she couldn't maintain the facade. And her hands shook harder. She set down the teacup carefully. Like even that small action required all her concentration. When she spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "I didn't just drink it to save him." Minji didn't move, didn't react, just waited. "Part of me wanted to escape." The words came slowly, painfully, like pulling shrapnel from a wound. "I've been so tired for so long, and in that moment when I saw the poison, I thought, at least if I die saving him, I'll finally matter. At least I'll be remembered as someone who loved him instead of someone he visited twice a week and hid like a shameful secret." She looked up, met Minji's eyes. "I have a beautiful son. I love him more than anything." Her voice cracked. "And part of me wanted to leave him. Not because he's not enough. Because I was so exhausted from being invisible that death felt like relief. The only way out I could see that wouldn't make me a monster for abandoning him." The tears came then. Silent at first, then harder. "Do you understand what I'm saying? I used your son's murder attempt as an excuse to kill myself. I turned Sang-ho's poison into my own escape plan." She pressed her hands to her face. "What kind of person does that? What kind of mother thinks that way?" Minji didn't comfort with platitudes, didn't reach across and squeeze her hand, didn't tell her it was okay. She just spoke truth. A person who has been slowly erased for 4 years. A mother who has been raising a child in emotional solitary confinement. A woman who was taught that her value is measured entirely by how much she can endure without complaint. She paused. "Yeah, you're not terrible, Nola. You're human. And you've been alone far too long." Nola broke then. Really broke. crying the way she hadn't allowed herself to in years, ugly, shaking, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and uncontrolled. Not the silent tears she'd learned to cry in empty apartments while Isaiah watched Paw Patrol in the next room. Minji didn't try to fix it, didn't tell her to calm down or that everything would be okay. She just sat with her, one hand on Nola's shoulder, letting her collapse without rushing her through it. For the first time since the poisoning, Nola wasn't being praised or pitied or apologized to. She was just being seen. When the crying finally slowed, Minji poured fresh tea, handed Nola the cup, waited until she'd taken a sip before speaking again. My son thinks he failed to listen to your warnings. He's apologizing for taking your competence for granted. He's buying you diamonds from Cartier and saying he'll value your input more. She paused. He has no idea that he drove you to want to disappear. And Nola, he needs to know. Not the version everyone's telling, where you're a noble martyr who saved the boss. The real version, where you were so invisible that poison felt like mercy. Nola's hands tightened around the teacup. If I tell him that, he'll hate himself. Or worse, he'll treat me like I'm broken, like I'm fragile. I don't want to be his rehabilitation project. Minji shook her head. You think being his rehabilitation project would be worse than being his hidden secret for another 4 years? This relationship is already broken, child. The question is whether either of you has the courage to rebuild it from the ground up, or if you're both going to settle for expensive apologies and unchanged behavior. She stood, smoothed her skirt. I'm going to tell Woo Jin that there is something you need to say to him. I'm going to tell him to listen without defending himself, without trying to fix it, without making it about his guilt. I'm going to tell him to hear you. She looked at Nola directly. And then, it's up to you whether you tell him the truth, or give him another lie he can pretend to accept. After Minji left, Nola sat alone in the living room. The diamond earrings were still on the coffee table. She hadn't even put them on, hadn't even opened the box since bringing them home. She stared at them. Beautiful, expensive, meaningless. When if she was going to survive this relationship, she couldn't keep pretending the poison was only about saving him. She had to tell him she'd been drowning long before that champagne glass ever touched her lips. 3 weeks post-poisoning, 2:17 a.m. Nola hadn't slept properly since the confession with Minji. She was in Isaiah's room again. Same chair she'd sat in 100 times before. Same nightlight casting soft shadows across her son's sleeping face. His chest rose and fell. Steady. Peaceful. 3 years old and completely unaware that his mother had briefly wanted to leave him. Nola watched, thinking about what it meant to be a mother who'd wanted to escape, thinking about the conversation she'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Tears streamed silently down her face. She didn't wipe them away. Just let them fall. At 1:45 a.m., Woojin's phone had buzzed on the nightstand in the master bedroom of his official residence, his mother's name on the screen. Your mistress is in Isaiah's room. Go sit with her. Mother, it's almost 2 in the morning, and I'm not at the apartment. Then get there. Don't talk. Don't fix. Just be there. She hung up before he could respond. So he went. Found Nola exactly where Minji said she'd be. Sitting in the rocking chair beside Isaiah's bed. Tears on her face. Staring at their son like she was memorizing something she was afraid to forget. Woo Jin didn't announce himself. Didn't ask if she was okay. He was learning that question was useless. He just sat on the floor beside her chair. 5 minutes passed. 10. The only sounds were Isaiah's soft breathing and the occasional sniffle from Nola. Finally, he said what Minji had coached him to say. My mother said you need to tell me something, and I'm going to listen. Nola didn't look at him, kept staring at Isaiah's sleeping face. Everyone keeps calling me brave. Heroic. They say I saved you. She paused, wiped her face with the sleeve of her robe, the old cotton one she'd had for years, soft from too many washes. But that's not the whole truth. Woojin stayed quiet, hands folded in his lap, waiting. When I saw that champagne glass, I knew it was poisoned. And yes, I thought, I can't let him drink that. I can't let Isaiah grow up without a father. Her voice was flat, steady, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed too many times. But there was another thought right behind it, a terrible thought. She finally turned to look at him, tears streaming, eyes red. I thought, if I drink this and die, at least it will be over. At least I'll finally matter to you. At least you'll remember me as someone who loved you instead of someone you hid from the world, like I was something to be ashamed of. Woojin's face went slack. She watched the shock register, watched him try to process what she was saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't just risk my life to save yours. I used your life as an excuse to escape mine. The words hung in the air. Isaiah shifted in his sleep, rolled over, clutched his stuffed dinosaur tighter. Nola looked back at her son. I have a beautiful child sleeping in this room right now. A child I love more than anything. Her voice broke. And part of me wanted to leave him. Not because he's not enough. Because I was so tired of being invisible that death felt like relief. She was sobbing now. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and uncontainable. I was so empty that poison felt like mercy. That's how invisible I became. Not just to you, but to myself. Woojin had made decisions that ended lives, survived attempts on his own life with cold calculation. But this, his lover telling him she'd wanted to die because he made her feel worthless, broke something in him that couldn't be fixed with strategy or money. His hands shook, his voice cracked when he tried to speak. Nola, don't apologize. She cut him off. Sharp. Final. Don't tell me you'll change. Don't make promises. I need you to understand what you did to me. Silence. Woojin sat beside her chair. And for the first time in their 4-year relationship, he had no response, no plan, no way to fix this with power or wealth or influence. He could only sit with the crushing weight of what he'd done. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. Isaiah's breathing, the hum of the nightlight, the distant sound of a car passing outside. The moment stretched into something unbearable. Finally, quietly, his voice raw. I didn't just fail to see you. I made you want to disappear. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement. Nola looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since the poisoning. Yes. One word. But it landed like a verdict. More silence. Then Woojin spoke again, barely above a whisper. I don't know how to fix this. Here's where Nola could have offered false hope, could have made it easier, could have told him it was okay, that they'd figure it out, that love was enough. But she didn't. I don't know if you can. She wiped her face, steadied her breathing. But if you want to try, really try, not just throw money at it, you have to start by being here, not bringing me things, not making grand gestures, just being present. Learning who I actually am, not who you need me to be. Woojin nodded, listening. I'm not asking you to love me differently, Nola continued. I'm asking you to see me at all, to notice when I'm in the room, to ask how I'm doing, and actually wait for an answer. She gestured toward Isaiah's bed, to sit with our son when he has nightmares instead of scheduling visits like business appointments. I'm asking you to act like we're a family, even if the world doesn't know it. Woojin sat with that. Let it settle. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep, didn't offer empty reassurances. Just said quietly, tomorrow morning I'm going to make breakfast. I'm probably going to burn it. Isaiah's probably going to think it's weird. You're probably going to want to take over. He looked at her. But I'm asking you to let me try? Not because I know what I'm doing, because I need to start somewhere. Nola didn't smile, didn't offer encouragement or praise, just said, okay. And in that moment, it wasn't the beginning of healing. It was just the end of pretending everything was fine. 6:30 a.m. The next morning, Woo Jin stood in Nola's kitchen, the apartment kitchen, the secret kitchen, staring at a carton of eggs like they were a puzzle he needed to solve. He'd never scrambled eggs. Not once in his 35 years. The carton sat on the granite counter, 12 eggs, organic, free range, and the kind Nola always bought from Whole Foods. He opened it, stared at them. How many eggs did 3-year-olds eat? Isaiah appeared in the doorway. Dinosaur pajamas, messy hair, confused expression. "Where's Mommy?" "Mommy's resting. I'm making breakfast." Isaiah tilted his head, studied his father with the brutal honesty only a 3-year-old can deliver. "You don't cook, Daddy." "I'm learning." From the doorway, still in her robe, the old cotton one from Target, Nola watched. Every instinct screamed at her to take over. The eggs were burning. He'd used the wrong pan. Cast iron instead of nonstick. He hadn't added butter first. Isaiah was getting restless, trying to climb onto the kitchen stool and nearly falling twice. But this is what she'd asked for. Him trying. Even badly. So she stayed quiet, arms crossed. Watching her lover discover that parenting at 6:30 a.m. was harder than running a crime syndicate. The eggs turned out blackened, crispy around the edges, rubbery in the middle. The toast was cold because he'd made it first and then started the eggs. Isaiah took one look at his plate and started crying. "What's wrong?" Woojin asked, genuinely confused. "My juice is in the wrong cup." He looked at the cup, blue plastic from the cabinet. "What's wrong with this cup?" Isaiah cried harder. Woojin looked at Nola, desperate, lost. She almost did it. Almost walked over, found the green cup with the dinosaur on it, poured the juice, fixed everything the way she'd fixed everything for 4 years. Then stopped herself. "What does Isaiah usually have for breakfast?" He blinked. "I don't know." "Then ask him." He turned back to their son, in 3 years old, tears streaming down his face over a cup. "Isaiah, what do you want?" Through sobs, the green cup, with the T-Rex. Woojin opened the cabinet, searched, found it behind 4 other cups, poured juice carefully, handed it to him. Isaiah stopped crying, took the cup, drank. Woojin looked at Nola like he'd just discovered gravity. She almost smiled. At 7:15 a.m., Minji arrived. She had her own key. Used it. Walked into chaos. Flour on the floor. Woojin had attempted pancakes as a backup plan and failed spectacularly. Nola still watching from the doorway. Woojin covered in egg and what looked like maple syrup. Isaiah eating burned toast cut into careful triangles. "What happened here?" Woojin looked up, flour in his hair. "I'm learning to make breakfast." Minji looked at Nola. Nola gave the smallest nod. "He's trying." The matriarch set down her purse. "Good. You're 35 years late, but good." This became the new pattern. Woojin came to the apartment at 6 a.m. instead of 10 p.m., handled Isaiah's morning routine. Badly at first. Clumsily, always. Nola coached when asked. Stayed silent when not. He learned that Isaiah needed his stuffed T-Rex or he wouldn't nap. That you had to make the dinosaur roar "good morning" or the whole routine fell apart. He learned that transitions required 5-minute warnings or Isaiah would melt down completely. 5 minutes until we leave for the park, buddy, then 2 minutes, then time to go. He learned that reading the same book 4 nights in a row, Goodnight Moon currently, wasn't boring to Isaiah. It was comforting, predictable, safe. These were things Nola had known for years. To him, they were revelations. Week 1, he asked her how she slept. Actually waited for the answer instead of checking his phone. "Fine. Isaiah woke up once, but I got him back down." "Why didn't you wake me?" "You were asleep." "Next time, wake me." Week 2. He noticed she was wearing a dress he'd never seen. "Is that new?" She looked down. Navy blue. From Nordstrom Rack. 3 years old. No, I've had it for a while. It looks nice. Such a small thing. But Nola felt it settle somewhere unexpected. Week 3. He found her crying in the bathroom at midnight. Didn't ask why. Didn't try to fix it. Just sat on the floor beside the tub while the water ran. After 10 minutes, she told him. Isaiah had a nightmare about monsters. I couldn't comfort him. He kept crying for you. And you weren't here. And I couldn't make it better alone. And that felt like failing. He was quiet. Then, tomorrow night I'll handle it. You don't know how. Then teach me. A month after the confession, 2:15 a.m., Isaiah screamed from a nightmare. Nola started to get up. Old instinct, muscle memory from 3 years of being the only one who responded. Woo Jin's hand on her shoulder. I've got it. She lay back down, skeptical, listening. Heard him pad down the hall to Isaiah's room. Heard his low voice, gentle in a way she'd never heard it before. It's okay, Isaiah. Daddy's here. You're safe. Heard Isaiah's sobbing slow, hiccup, soften. Heard him reading the dinosaur book Isaiah always demanded after bad dreams. His voice steady, patient, reading words he'd probably memorized by now. Heard silence. 10 minutes later, he came back to bed. Slipped under the covers carefully. Trying not to wake her even though she was already awake, whispered in the dark. He's asleep. And Nola realized something that shifted the ground beneath her. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to prove something or earn forgiveness. He was parenting. They didn't fall back in love. They weren't suddenly passionate or romantic. Most nights they slept in the same bed like polite strangers who'd agreed to share space. But he was there, present, learning, making mistakes, plenty of them, and trying again, asking questions instead of assuming he knew better. And Nola felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years, the faint possibility that she might not be invisible forever. Drop a comment if you've ever been in a relationship where you felt unseen. Subscribe for more stories about women who refuse to disappear. Now, let's see what happens next. While Woo Jin learned to make breakfast and Nola learned to trust again, there was someone they hadn't forgotten. Choi Sang-ho, the poisoner. He sat in a safe house on the outskirts of Atlanta. Not police custody, family custody. Because in the Choi organization, betrayal was handled internally. The house was sparse. 2 bedrooms, IKEA furniture assembled quickly and without care. Guards rotated shifts outside. Sang-ho wasn't allowed to leave, wasn't allowed phone calls except to his wife, Yuna, monitored and brief. 4 weeks he'd been sitting there. 4 weeks of waiting for judgment. 4 weeks of replaying the moment Nola drank that champagne and collapsed. The moment his desperate gamble turned into something unforgivable. On a Thursday afternoon, Minji arrived alone. No guards, no entourage. Just the matriarch in her burgundy coat, carrying her vintage handbag, walking into that safe house like she owned it. Which, in a way, she did. Sang-ho stood when she entered. Instinct, respect, fear. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table, gestured for him to sit. He did. She didn't speak immediately, just studied him with the same calculating stillness she'd used to survive 5 decades in this world. Finally, tell me why. Not an order, an invitation. Sang-ho had expected rage, violence, traditional retribution. Instead, she was giving him space to explain. And because he'd been drowning in guilt for 4 weeks, because Nola had survived but his conscience hadn't, he told the truth. They threatened my family. His voice cracked on the word family. Yuna, the baby she's carrying. They sent pictures. At her doctor's appointment, at the grocery store, at our house. They knew her schedule, knew everything. He pulled out his phone, showed Minji the messages he'd saved even though he should have deleted them. Photos of his pregnant wife getting into her car. Time-stamped. captioned with addresses and schedules. They gave me 10 days. Eliminate your brother or watch your family die slowly. That's what they said. Slowly. Minji looked at the photos. Her expression didn't change. The loan sharks wanted the shipping routes. Sang-ho continued. The pharmaceutical imports Wu Jin was about to secure. They calculated that if there was a leadership transition during the chaos, they could renegotiate terms, get access, make millions. He set down the phone. I was just the weapon. Silence. Then Sang-ho said the part that had been eating him alive. I knew Nola spotted the discrepancies, the financial irregularities, my gambling debts. I knew she tried to warn Wu Jin twice. His voice broke. I gambled that if she tried to intervene at the reunion, she'd be dismissed again. That's how invisible she was. I weaponized it. I turned her invisibility into my opportunity. He looked at Minji with raw anguish. I never imagined she'd drink it herself, the only person in this family who ever treated me with genuine kindness. And I almost killed her. Minji was quiet for a long moment. Then, you were trapped between two impossible choices. You chose wrong, but I understand why. Sang-ho blinked. That wasn't what he'd expected. The loan sharks didn't just threaten you randomly, she continued. They studied this family. Yet they identified the weakest link. Not you, but the relationship between you and your brother. They knew Wu Jin wouldn't see you as a threat until it was too late. She paused. They were right. Do you know why they were right? Sang-ho shook his head. Because my son built an empire but forgot to build a family. He trusted you to execute orders but never asked what you needed. He relied on Nola to hold everything together, but never saw the weight she carried. Minji's voice was steady, clinical, truthful. He became so focused on external threats that he couldn't see the internal fractures. You were desperate. Nola was invisible. Both vulnerabilities he created through neglect. Outside the door, Wu Jin stood listening. He'd come to deliver his own judgment, his own rage. Instead, he was hearing his mother explain how his leadership style had created the conditions for betrayal. How this wasn't just Sang-ho's failure, it was his. He opened the door. Sang-ho stood immediately, braced for violence. But Wu Jin's voice was calm, controlled. The loan sharks have been handled. Yuna is safe. The debt is erased. Sang-ho stared, shocked. Why? Because Nola asked me to protect them. Wu Jin sat down at the table across from his brother. She said your family shouldn't pay for a choice you made under duress. She said forgiveness doesn't mean trust. But it means refusing to become as ruthless as the people threatening us. He leaned back, looked at Sang-ho directly. You can't stay in the organization. That's not negotiable. But you can leave alive, with your family intact. Sang-ho's hands shook. I'm setting you up in Seattle. Legitimate business, import consulting, nothing criminal. You'll work for your money like normal people do. Starbucks on your commute, PTA meetings, soccer practice. Wu Jin's voice was steady. And if you ever come back to Atlanta, if you ever contact anyone in this organization again, that mercy ends. Sang-ho was crying now. I don't deserve this. No, Wu Jin said. But my son's mother does. She saved my life. And she's teaching me that power without compassion is just cruelty with better organization. 3 days later, Sang-ho left Atlanta. Wu Jin stood in the driveway of that safe house, watching his brother load a U-Haul with the few belongings he'd been allowed to keep. Yuna sat in the passenger seat of their Honda, pregnant, silent. She didn't look at Wu Jin, didn't wave. Just stared straight ahead, holding the address of their new apartment in Seattle like a lifeline. The traditional move would have been execution. Wu Jin knew that. His father would have considered mercy weakness, the advisors would have called it poor leadership. But Nola's words echoed. You can choose to be different. You can choose to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. And for the first time in his leadership, maybe the first time in his life, he chose the harder, kinder path. Not because it was strategic, because she'd asked him to. 2 months after the poisoning, life had found a new rhythm. Not perfect, not healed, but different. Woo Jin still ran the organization. The shipping deal had closed successfully. Territory was secure. Money flowed. The empire functioned exactly as it had before. But now he was at the apartment 4 nights a week instead of 2. Now he knew that Isaiah preferred the very hungry caterpillar at bedtime, and that he wanted Goodnight Moon read twice, not once. Now he asked Nola how her day was, and actually listened to answers that weren't about logistics or schedules. The small moments rebuilt trust in ways diamonds never could. He brought her coffee in the morning, not Starbucks from his driver. Coffee he made himself with the hazelnut creamer she liked, the kind he'd had to search for in the pantry because he'd never noticed it before. Not because he was trying to earn points, because he noticed she looked tired. She let him handle Isaiah's bath time even though he got water everywhere. On the floor, on himself. Somehow on the ceiling once, though neither of them understood how. And they sat together after Isaiah was asleep and just talked. About nothing important. The distance that had always felt like a canyon slowly began to close. One morning, Isaiah asked a question while Nola was packing his lunch. "Mommy, why is Daddy here more?" Nola paused, held a Ziploc bag of apple slices. How do you explain attempted murder and redemption to a 3-year-old? Daddy realized he was missing important things, so now he's making time for them. Isaiah considered this with the serious logic only children possess. Did he realize we're important? Nola's throat tightened. Yes, baby. He realized. Minji watched all of it with quiet satisfaction. She didn't praise the progress, didn't congratulate them, just observed. One evening, Isaiah was asleep in his room. Kwujin and Nola stood at the sink doing dishes together, a sight the matriarch never thought she'd witness. He washed, she dried, moving in a rhythm that was still new but becoming familiar. Minji stood in the doorway. You're learning, both of you. That's all I wanted. Then she left before either could respond. The closest thing to approval she'd ever given. 3 months post-poisoning. Woo Jin attempted to do Isaiah's hair for daycare photos. Just a simple brush and some gel. It was a disaster. Somehow, he'd made their son look like he'd been electrocuted. Isaiah looked in the bathroom mirror, tilted his head, studied his reflection. I look like a porcupine. Woo Jin looked at Nola, defeated. And she laughed. Actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle or forced smile. Real laughter that came from somewhere genuine. He joined in. Isaiah joined in. And for 5 minutes, they were just a family who thought porcupine hair was funny. That night, after Nola had fixed Isaiah's hair properly, a simple brush through that took 30 seconds, after getting him to bed, she and Woo Jin sat on the small balcony of the apartment. Tea in mismatched mugs, the kind you accumulate over years without noticing. Silent for a while, comfortable silence, not the heavy kind. Then he asked, "How are you doing? Really doing?" She considered the question. Actually considered it instead of giving the automatic response. Some days I'm angry. Some days I'm scared this won't last. Some days I look at you and still see the man who made me invisible. She paused, watched steam rise from her tea. But today I saw you trying to do our son's hair with a YouTube tutorial pulled up on your phone. And I thought, maybe you're learning to see me by learning to see him. His response was honest, not performative. I'm terrified that I'll slip back. That I'll get busy and start treating you like a convenience again. That I'll fail, and you'll finally leave. I'm terrified too, Nola said. That I'll settle for less than I deserve because it's easier than demanding more. That I'll forget I almost wanted to die and go back to just surviving. They looked at each other. So what do? He asked. We stay scared. Fear keeps us honest. Later that night, they were close again, for the first time since the poisoning. Not wild passion, not cinematic romance. Gentle, tentative, learning each other again. Afterward, lying in the dark, Nola spoke quietly. I don't forgive you yet. But I'm starting to believe you're trying. Wu Jin's voice was equally quiet. That's enough for now. That's enough. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows. Wu Jin making breakfast. Still badly, but confidently. Pancakes shaped vaguely like dinosaurs, or blobs. Hard to tell. Isaiah eating them anyway, drowning everything in syrup. Nola drinking coffee he'd made to her taste this time, the right amount of creamer, the right temperature. Minji arriving with fresh fruit from the Korean grocery store, and minimal criticism. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, imperfect, real. But for the first time in 4 years, Nola sat at the table and didn't feel invisible. 4 months after the poisoning, Nola stood in Isaiah's room watching him sleep. Same room where she'd confessed to Wu Jin that she'd wanted to escape. Same chair where she'd cried silent tears while contemplating whether anyone would miss her if she was gone. But tonight, the room felt different. She felt different. The mafia world hadn't changed. Wu Jin still ran a criminal organization. There were still threats, still dangers, still ethical lines that kept her up some nights. But the relationship was changing. Not because he'd stopped being a crime boss, because he'd started being present. Because he was learning you can't build an empire worth keeping if you dismantle the people holding it together. But even as things improved at the apartment, shadows were gathering. Wu Jin's wife, his official wife, the one the world knew about, had started asking questions. Why was he coming home later? Why was he distracted? Why did he smell like a different laundry detergent? And somewhere in Seoul, a call was being made. A decision that would bring everything Nola and Wu Jin had built crashing down. Because secrets, no matter how carefully kept, have a way of demanding to be seen. And Nola Jordan, the hidden woman, the invisible mother, the mistress who'd drunk poison to matter, was about to learn that being seen comes with its own dangers. At a family dinner last week, Minji pulled Nola aside. I arranged that reunion because I saw you fading. I thought proximity might help. I never imagined it would nearly kill you. Nola met her eyes. I never imagined it would save me. Minji studied her face with the same calculating precision she'd used for 5 decades. You're not the woman I met 4 years ago. She would have stayed invisible forever. She almost did. But poison has a way of clarifying what matters. Tonight, another evening at the apartment. Same small kitchen, same secondhand furniture, same positioning, Nola and Wu Jin on the couch, Isaiah asleep in the next room. But everything was different. Wu Jin looked up from his phone, actually put it down, looked at Nola. Are you okay? She smiled. Small. Genuine. Yes, I'm here. He reached across the space that used to feel like an ocean and took her hand. A gesture he would have considered weakness 4 months ago. Now it was just truth. She was no longer invisible. But as Nola looked at their intertwined fingers, his Korean, hers black, each their son sleeping in the next room as proof of a love no one was supposed to know about, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would test whether this fragile new beginning could survive the weight of the world that wanted them apart. Nola Jordan didn't just survive poison, she survived 4 years of slow erasure, and when she finally had the courage to demand more than survival, she discovered something powerful. The person who makes you invisible can learn to see you if you refuse to disappear, not because you're a martyr, because you matter. But this story isn't over, because somewhere, someone is watching. Someone who doesn't want Choi Woo-jin's hidden family to exist. Someone who sees Nola not as a woman who deserves to be seen, but as a threat that needs to be eliminated. And the next poison might not come in a champagne glass. This is a story about the quietest kind of strength, the strength to stay when leaving would be easier. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button for more stories about women who refuse to disappear into the roles everyone expects them to play. Drop a comment. Are you team stay or team leave? Because Nola chose to stay. Not everyone would. Not everyone should. But her choice was hers. Made with clear eyes and hard-won power. And that's what makes her dangerous. A mistress sat at a family reunion, poison in her veins, while her lover ignored her dying. 4 months later, she sits in their secret apartment. Alive, seen, finally beginning to be understood. The Korean mafia boss learned something his empire couldn't teach him. The most valuable thing you can protect isn't territory. It's the woman who makes home feel like more than just another fortress to defend. But the real question remains, when the world discovers her existence, will he protect her the same way she protected him? Subscribe to find out.